Most content doesn't fail because it's bad. It fails because the right people never see it. However, there is a way to fix it. Using a simple stack of tools I'm going to share with you today, you can turn content creation into a system so that you can build a workflow that helps you research, develop ideas, edit, organize them, and even promote them so that they reach the right audience. This workflow will save you a lot of time and make your content much more original and interesting. In fact, I've been using it myself for my own projects, and since I started using this system, I got really good results, many more views and clicks, as you can see from my Google Search Console. So I'm going to share with you today how it works, and hopefully you will be able to apply it in your own projects. In fact, this workflow is based on 4 pillars. One is the context, so you need to organize your documents in a way that your LLM has access to all the original ideas and sources and perspectives that you have so that it generates truly original and not generic results. The second one are the MCP servers that allow you to have access to real-time data so that you have live access to search intent, to what people find, what they search for, and then it will give you and your LLM a much better idea of how this content should be created. The third one are the skills that enable you to add your own style and to humanize the output so that your content doesn't sound like AI generated stuff. And the fourth one are the knowledge graphs that allow you to analyze the structure of content, optimize it, see what are the main topics inside, what are the gaps within, and how you could combine them in new, interesting ways. So I'm going to show you how all of this works using some of the examples from my own work. So first, let me show you the tool stack I use. In my case, I like Cursor AI, which is a software development tool, but you can also use it for viewing Markdown files and HTML files, as well as Claude Code. And also Cursor AI has an AI agent that I can use as an AI chat to interact with my content. The advantage of using Cursor AI is that it has a folder directory structure of all my knowledge, so I can open it in a project, and that project will be the context that I'm working with. It can be my website, like I have in this case. It's a whole website that I have as a context. Or I can have my own internal LLM wiki. I made a video about setting up your wiki that I'm going to link to above that you can check out if you want a slightly more advanced setup. But what it gives you is that you have a context that you can work with. In the same way, you can also use Claude and open Claude Code Desktop on a particular folder that you select. So when you start a new session, you can actually select a folder where it's going to be working, and then you work inside that folder so your AI has access to the context. So this is the first pillar that we need, is the context and some tool that can work with that context and that can extract your highly original, interesting data and perspective from it. All right, so this is the first pillar in that setup, context. And once we work with the context, I'm going to show you inside Cursor just because it's easier to demonstrate. What I like to begin with is to kind of get an overview of what it's about. And you can use the built-in AI chat for that. So here I asked it what are the main topics inside, and it gave me a list of the main topics in my repository of knowledge so that I can remind myself what I've been thinking about and what are the most important ideas. Or I can also visualize the ideas using the InfraNodus extension that you can use inside Cursor, where I right-click on the folder with all the data, all the graphs, and then it visualizes for me a representation of the main topics inside here. So that gives me a really nice understanding of what this repository is about, what are some main ideas, what are the less represented topics, and already gives me a really nice understanding of how I can develop it further and what should be the specific ideas I focus on so that I contribute something interesting to the discourse. Here you have this content gap feature that shows you the clusters that are not so well connected yet, and this is usually where the new ideas lie. So if you want to create highly original content, then you can focus on these clusters, on the gaps between them, and then develop some content ideas in relation to them. And this is actually exactly what the InfraNodus MCP server does. So this is the second pillar, using the MCP server in order to understand how to structure your content and also to have it connect to some real world data. This is very important. I'm going to show you what happened here. When I asked it first to create content for me, right here, at the very beginning, it extracted some very interesting ideas, and then we settled on the notion of self-organized criticality. However, I felt like it was too niche of a topic to explore, and this is where the InfraNodus MCP server comes in, because I said to it, okay, can you do CO study on this topic and tell me what is searched for most on this topic? Because I was afraid that people don't actually search for it. And this is exactly the results that I got from the InfraNodus MCP server. So you see it ran the analyze Google search results tool of InfraNodus MCP server and then analyze related search queries. And it told me, all right, actually, you know what? There's not so many people searching for this stuff. Self-organized criticality in relation to the body, no one is searching for this stuff. However, you have a much wider topic that you can tap into, which is vagal tone, vagal activity, nervous system regulation, and so on. So perhaps you should focus on that, but you add the ideas that you have in your wiki, self-organized criticality, but you connect it to these topics that are much more searched for. So this becomes a very interesting approach because you start from your own ideas, right? Like we identified there is a specific angle that we can look at. But at this point, we need the InfraNodus MCP server to run SEO analysis to get the real data from the search queries that people use, from the Google search results, and tell us what we should actually focus on in order to make our topic broad enough so that it can reach the right audience. So this is the second thing that we do. We run the SEO analysis on it. And actually here you need to hit a sweet spot because you don't want your topic to be too niche like I had at the beginning that no one even searches for it, but you also don't want it to be too broad because if you're focusing on a topic that everyone else is talking about in the same way, then you will just get lost in the content out there because there's too much stuff on that subject. So what you need to do, and this is what the InfraNodus MCP server does, is that it narrows down. You see, it shows you what is happening here. It says, okay, this is the supply, this is the demand. You need to focus on what people search for, but don't yet find. So it finds some gaps like that, finds some low-hanging fruits, opportunities that you can focus on where you would rank high for because no one else is writing about this, but you're still talking about the stuff that people are interested in. And then it gave me this whole content strategy, which then was turned into articles that you can see here on vagal tone regulation, how to improve vagal tone, and then some spoke articles, because the way that you structure content is that you make the main page and then you create spokes. So the main page is called a pillar, and then spokes are the pages that elaborate on the concept in more detail, and then Google and LLM, they will think that you have higher authority in that subject because you're really going deep into the subject and it has this whole structure, right? So there it created 4 different articles, and then I ran some skills that I'm going to show you later that enabled me to then make it sound more human. And of course then I manually revise everything and analyze because I don't just want to put out AI generated content out there. I want to also make sure that there is my style inside, my way of thinking, and so on. I just use it for structure, just like you would use it for coding. You would review the structure, make some changes, and so on. So it's the same way. All right, so this is the second part. You use the SEO tool, search engine optimization tool, inside your AI chat in order to see how it works better. And let me demonstrate how the same approach works in Claude also, because in Claude I had the same issue actually, and that was for my InfraNodus website, so you can even check the page that it created. I said that, okay, you have the SEO skill, so that skill is actually a skill that you can download also from our repository. I will link to it above and also in the description to the video, where it explains to your AI how to use the InfraNodus MCP tools in order to generate SEO, search engine optimization insights. So here it says, okay, I ran the skill, then it found the file with the skill, and then it ran SEO analysis of the page that I provided using the InfraNodus MCP tools, and then it identified some quick wins. So what can I do to that page to improve it? And then it proposed me some changes. It actually did them directly in the folder. So because I was working inside the website, as I showed you here, you can actually decide which folder you work in. So I was already working in the folder with actual website content. So then it made all the changes. I verified, I made some corrections, and then I push it directly and it goes online. And then you get a page like you have here with some changes to the structure, to the language that I use in order to appeal to a broader audience. So this is an example of how it's used inside also building a live website as well, right? And here I think it's important to mention this third pillar, which are the skills, because the skills allow me to codify some of the workflows that I have. So for instance, this search engine optimization skills explains to Claude and also to Cursor AI. They both have access to that skill because Cursor has access to all the skills that Claude has. It explains to AI how to use the InfraNodus MCP server tools and in which sequence in order to get the best results. So it kind of structures the use of this knowledge and it will generate much better results. So I really recommend you to download that skill. And so then once it went through that skill, the second stage that you can do is to apply your own style to it. And I have a special skill with my own writing style, and you can create one like that for yourself. Or what you can also do is to use a humanizer skill, and then you download that skill, and then Claude or any AI that you use will try to optimize your text so it sounds more human and less AI. There are some patterns that AI tends to use that make it sound too much generic, and so there you would actually make sure that it sounds in a more interesting way. All right, so that would be the third element, the skills to make sure that your content doesn't sound generic and that it has a style, that it's human, and you can also at this stage verify it manually, how it works, and make sure that it really lives up to your standards. All right, and then the last thing that I want to show you what I do is once I create this content, I can actually analyze the final content to see if there is anything structurally that is missing. And I can do that inside Cursor directly, because if I choose that page that was just created on Waggle Tone, I can read it, of course, but you see it's quite a big page. I think it's around 4,000 symbols or something like this. Or I can right-click it, open it as an InfraNodus graph. And by the way, if you don't want to use a cursor for viewing MD files, you can also do it inside Obsidian. We have an Obsidian plugin where you can view the same thing. And then InfraNodus shows me the structure of this discourse, and it shows me what are the main ideas here. So for example, here it has a cluster on Waggle capacity, on heart system, coordination scale, recovery sleep, fractal research, and so on. And if I click and see the structure of the discourse is focused, so it gives me advice to diversify a bit, and I could actually do that by seeing how I can focus on the smaller clusters and develop them further. For instance, vagus exercise. And this is exactly what I did, because I identified, all right, this text has too less information on vagus exercises. So then I created a whole page on vagus exercises separately that you see here. And then you see this graph structure that helps you analyze and optimize content, because you can find which topics are overrepresented, which topics are underrepresented, and then manually steer AI's attention to these topics. And if you use it inside the AI chat here in Claude Code or in Cursor AI agent, you can actually just give it this instruction, build a graph from it and see which topics are underrepresented and so on. It even has an optimized text tool that will do it for you automatically. So it will understand what to do depending on the structure. And then another feature which is really nice with the graphs is that once you identify that the structure is fine, you can also go to the content gaps, and you can see what are the gaps inside this content that you could bridge with new ideas. So for instance, let's say if I have one cluster here on Waggle engagement and pattern reach, I can ask the system, okay, so what about generating some interesting content that would connect these ideas together? And what I can do here, I can click on the question, okay, and then what InfraNodus does, in here in terminal, you have a little tab called InfraNodus log. It will actually create a graph-based prompt which has this data. So it copies this prompt here into clipboard, and then you can go into your Claude Code and say, with the open page, explore this idea. And then I simply paste what I have copied. And what I have copied is the structure of these two clusters and some context where they're coming from. And then this will steer your AI's attention to that particular gap and motivate it to bridge it somehow with new ideas. So then it will add some new information or content to that page that will ensure that this gap is bridged. And this is a very interesting way to develop your content, because you're manually steering AI using the graph by identifying the gaps or the topics that you want to develop, and then you generate prompts that you can just generate by clicking on these buttons, and then you paste them into your AI agent, and then it tells you, all right, so here there is some kind of addition that we could do to this content in order to make sure that it's more relevant and that it bridges this gap. So this is another approach that you can use, and you can do that inside Cursor AI, or if you do it inside Obsidian, then you have a little window here where there is an AI module that will generate this content directly for you. So this is how it would work. These are the 4 stages, the context that we have at the beginning. So we identify, the structure that we want to work on. Then we have the MCP servers here that enable our system to have live access to information and to extract the search intent and search results and understand how to structure and frame this content so that it's not too broad and not too narrow, but that people can actually find it. Then we have the skills that work on the style and make sure the content is not generic. And then we have the knowledge graphs that we can then use manually to analyze the structure of this content and optimize it. And if we don't want to use them manually, we can go inside our chat and just use the graphs themselves. But I quite like actually using the visual representation because that allows me to have my own human contribution to this content and to ensure that I really steered AI through it rather than had everything generated for me. So this is how it works. You can use it inside Cursor AI or Claude Code, Claude Desktop. If you like to use it in Terminal, you can also use it in Terminal. Try this workflow. Let me know how it works. Let me know if you have any questions or comments and if you use a similar workflow. And also please share some of the ideas you have about how this could be improved or maybe some other workflows that you use, some other tools. I would be very curious to hear it, and I also answer to every comment, so I would very much welcome to have a discussion about this. Thank you.